Hey guys, tonight we slip through the coal-smudged veil of time and land squarely in the heart of Victorian London, somewhere between the clatter of horseshoes on cobblestones and the wet slap of fish guts underfoot. You stand at the edge of a city bursting with soot, secrets, and more smells than you ever wanted to name. The fog's so thick you could butter toast with it. The gas lamps flicker like they're second-guessing their life choices. And around the corner? That's probably a pickpocket, or a rat the size of a dachshund. Either way, keep one hand on your coin purse and the other on your sanity. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the train at Euston Station, 1872. It's raining, naturally, because London doesn't do anything without a little drizzle for dramatic effect. Your boots, if you even have any, are already soaked through. Mud squelches up your ankles. And that's not just mud. Let's just say the Thames isn't the only thing overflowing in this city. The smell hits first. It's like someone cooked cabbage in a public restroom and then left it to ferment with a dead pigeon. Your eyes water. Welcome to the big smoke. You shuffle toward the street and immediately regret it. A coach barrels past, splashing you with something. It might be horse urine. It might be rainwater. It might be the ghost of cholera past. You'll never know, and that's probably for the best. The buildings loom like damp sentinels, grimy brick giants with leering chimneys and windows like darkened eyes. Blackened by soot, their grandeur peeks out beneath the filth like a faded tattoo. Every inch of this place is alive, from the steam curling out of sewer grates to the scuttling things you probably shouldn't inspect too closely. The fog? Oh yes, the fog is legendary. Londoners even named it the pea super. Not for color, mind you, but for consistency. You can't see your own outstretched hand in it. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's a Tuesday. Historians still argue whether the fog was more dangerous than the diseases it carried. Some say it was just an inconvenience. Others blame it for carriage crashes, street crime, and widespread respiratory misery. You, however, are pretty sure your lungs are growing fur. A boy brushes past you, no older than 8, barefoot and grinning with teeth like broken piano keys. He's already stolen your handkerchief. And your sandwich. Probably your self-respect, too. You won't get them back. You walk on, passing a line of ragged women with babies slung over their shoulders like sacks of potatoes. One is selling flowers. One is definitely not. The others? Hard to say. Behind them, a rag and bone man calls out, his cart piled high with discarded junk. Or treasure, depending on your level of desperation. Need a new hat? Too bad. Hats here are made of felt stiffened with mercury. Great for style, terrible for your brain. Mad as a hatter wasn't just a phrase. It was a daily hazard. Side effects include tremors, mood swings, and yelling at pigeons. Somewhere in the mist, a church bell tolls. Time doesn't mean much here. Most people don't have watches, and if they do, they've probably pawned them. What matters is surviving until dusk without catching typhus, being trampled by a hansom cab, or ending up on the wrong side of someone's gin-fueled rage. And yet, there's beauty in the grime. Oil lamps glow like tiny suns in windows. You catch the scent of roasting chestnuts. A man in a ridiculous top hat offers to shine your shoes, which are mostly just wet leather sadness by now. There's a strange, earnest energy to it all. Like the city knows it's a monster, but it's trying, okay? You pass the River Thames. It looks like someone spilled ink into a toilet bowl. Victorian Londoners thought it could handle anything. Sewage, corpses, industrial runoff? They were wrong. The great stink of 1858 was so bad Parliament had to shut its doors. True story. The smell literally chased lawmakers out of their own building. Even Charles Dickens, who somehow managed to romanticize everything from pickpockets to orphans, called the Thames a deadly sewer. So yes, don't fall in, or look too long. It might look back. Up ahead, someone's coughing violently. You cross the street to avoid them, then realize you've just stepped into an open gutter. Cold slime soaks through your socks. You try not to scream. A nearby cat watches with zero sympathy. There's no such thing as personal space here. People jostle past, brushing your coat, your shoulders, your patience. Hey guys, tonight we slip through the coal-smudged veil of time and land squarely in the heart of Victorian London. Somewhere between the clatter of horseshoes on cobblestones and the wet slap of fish guts underfoot. You stand at the edge of a city bursting with soot, secrets, and more smells than you ever wanted to name. The fog's so thick you could butter toast with it. The gas lamps flicker like they're second-guessing their life choices. And around the corner? That's probably a pickpocket, or a rat the size of a dachshund. Either way, keep one hand on your coin purse and the other on your sanity. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the train at Euston Station, 1872. It's raining, naturally, because London doesn't do anything without a little drizzle for dramatic effect. Your boots, if you even have any, are already soaked through. Mud squelches up your ankles. And that's not just mud. Let's just say the Thames isn't the only thing overflowing in this city. The smell hits first. It's like someone cooked cabbage in a public restroom and then left it to ferment with a dead pigeon. Your eyes water. Welcome to the big smoke. You shuffle toward the street and immediately regret it. A coach barrels past, splashing you with something. It might be horse urine, it might be rainwater, it might be the ghost of cholera past. You'll never know, and that's probably for the best. The buildings loom like damp sentinels, grimy brick giants with leering chimneys and windows like darkened eyes. Blackened by soot, their grandeur peeks out beneath the filth like a faded tattoo. Every inch of this place is alive, from the steam curling out of sewer grates to the scuttling things you probably shouldn't inspect too closely. The fog? Oh yes, the fog is legendary. Londoners even named it the pea super. Not for color, mind you, but for consistency. You can't see your own outstretched hand in it. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's a Tuesday. Historians still argue whether the fog was more dangerous than the diseases it carried. Some say it was just an inconvenience. Others blame it for carriage crashes, street crime, and widespread respiratory misery. You, however, are pretty sure your lungs are growing fur. A boy brushes past you, no older than 8, barefoot and grinning with teeth like broken piano keys. He's already stolen your handkerchief. And your sandwich. Probably your self-respect, too. You won't get them back. You walk on, passing a line of ragged women with babies slung over their shoulders like sacks of potatoes. One is selling flowers. One is definitely not. The others? Hard to say. Behind them, a rag-and-bone man calls out, his cart piled high with discarded junk. Or treasure, depending on your level of desperation. Need a new hat? Too bad. Hats here are made of felt stiffened with mercury. Great for style, terrible for your brain. Mad as a hatter wasn't just a phrase. It was a daily hazard. Side effects include tremors, mood swings, and yelling at pigeons. Somewhere in the mist, a church bell tolls. Time doesn't mean much here. Most people don't have watches, and if they do, they've probably pawned them. What matters is surviving until dusk without catching typhus, being trampled by a hansom cab, or ending up on the wrong side of someone's gin-fueled rage. And yet, there's beauty in the grime. Oil lamps glow like tiny suns in windows. You catch the scent of roasting chestnuts. A man in a ridiculous top hat offers to shine your shoes, which are mostly just wet leather sadness by now. There's a strange, earnest energy to it all. Like the city knows it's a monster, but it's trying, okay? You pass the River Thames. It looks like someone spilled ink into a toilet bowl. Victorian Londoners thought it could handle anything. Sewage, corpses, industrial runoff. They were wrong. The great stink of 1858 was so bad Parliament had to shut its doors. True story. The smell literally chased lawmakers out of their own building. Even Charles Dickens, who somehow managed to romanticize everything from pickpockets to orphans, called the Thames a deadly sewer. So yes, don't fall in, or look too long. It might look back. Up ahead, someone's coughing violently. You cross the street to avoid them, then realize you've just stepped into an open gutter. Cold slime soaks through your socks. You try not to scream. A nearby cat watches with zero sympathy. There's no such thing as personal space here. People jostle past, brushing your coat, your shoulders, your patience. Victorians loved their vibrant greens and blues, shades only possible through chemical processes involving poison. The popular Paris green was especially deadly, made with copper arsenite. You might be inhaling poison right now, and you paid extra for the luxury. A gentleman walks by doused in cologne. It doesn't help. In fact, it mixes with the stink like two drunks trying to tango and just ends up falling over. Scented pomade, lavender water, rose oil. These are the tools of the trade for anyone trying to out-sniff the stink. Some even shove herbs up their nose, which, to be honest, starts sounding like a solid plan. You duck into a public convenience, Victorian slang for a public lavatory. It's a new invention, sort of. These cast-iron underground toilets look like little shrines to hygiene, but descend the steps, and you're greeted by a smell so dense it has mass. You try not to breathe. You fail. You leave. Later in the day, you stroll through Spitalfields Market. The stalls offer fresh vegetables, smoked fish, and flowers, all of which smell delightful until the wind shifts and brings a slap of reality from the tannery down the road. Tanning leather in the Victorian era involves animal skins, urine, lime, and plenty of rotting. You pass one man scraping a hide with what looks like sheer hatred and a butter knife. He nods at you. You nod back. That's enough socializing for today. Quirky detail for you. One fringe remedy to combat the bad air was stuffing your nose with a sponge soaked in vinegar. Not subtle, not effective, but very Victorian. Like fighting fire with salad dressing. And here's where the debate sharpens again. Historians still argue whether the city's infamous stench was the true villain behind its high death rate, or simply a byproduct of overpopulation and industrial growth. Some even speculate the fog helped hide the worst parts, offering a twisted kind of mercy. Honestly, if you can't see what you're stepping in, you can pretend it's just mud. Ish. As the sun lowers again behind an oily sky, you find yourself oddly used to it all. The smells don't fade. They just rearrange. Your brain starts filing them under normal. The cabbage, the smoke, the horses, the brine and the fish guts and the faint whiff of regret. London doesn't smell bad anymore. It just smells like London. You return to your room, nose half numb, lungs probably one shade closer to soot. You light a candle, the wax spitting as if even it has opinions about the day. Through the wall, someone's still coughing. You breathe in, exhale, and think, at least you didn't step in anything glowing today. That's a win. You wake up to a new horror. You're freezing. Not just forgot to pull up the blanket cold, but the ghosts of every bad winter decision you've ever made are here to haunt your toes. Cold. Victorian London doesn't do central heating. You've got a single fireplace that's given up trying, a thin blanket with the insulating power of wet tissue, and a draft slipping through the cracks in the wall like a burglar with boundary issues. So, how do you dress to not die? You begin the day with the all-important first layer, the chemise. Yes, even for men, there's a base layer involved, typically cotton or wool, depending on your social status and your willingness to itch all day. Over that comes a corset if you're a woman, or a waistcoat if you're a man, or both if you're adventurous and very committed to structure. Corsets are no joke. They cinch, squeeze, and smush organs into a new real estate arrangement, all for the sake of that coveted hourglass figure. Historians still argue whether corsets actually caused long-term organ damage, or if it was just Victorian overreaction to Victorian overreaction. What's certain is that breathing gets complicated, and if you eat too fast, there's a non-zero chance you'll faint into your soup. Then it's time for your outerwear. For gentlemen, a frock coat, high collar, cravat, or bow tie, and a top hat tall enough to qualify for its own postal code. For ladies, bustle skirts, petticoats, so many petticoats, plus bodices, gloves, and possibly a tiny hat balanced at an angle that defies physics and reason. And let's not forget the danger lurking in fashion. Crinolines. Those wide, bell-shaped hoop skirts might look elegant, but they're a genuine fire hazard. Picture this. You get too close to the hearth, and whoosh! Entire obituaries were written about women who went up in flames faster than a poorly built haystack. There's even one particularly unlucky lady who caught fire in a parlor and had 3 other guests go up with her while trying to help. Victorian social calls. Bring a fan, maybe a fire extinguisher. For shoes, you've got hard leather boots with soles like slabs of misery. Forget arch support. These are designed to last through cobblestones, not comfort. Break them in? You'll break first. Still, they're better than going barefoot like many poor children did, even in winter. Fashion meets frostbite, a losing combo. You step outside, layered like a walk-in closet, and immediately question your choices. The sun is out today, rare and blinding. Beneath all that wool and whalebone, you're cooking. You can't take off layers without undressing in public, which would cause scandal, arrest, and potentially a very awkward meeting with the local vicar. You pass a group of chimney sweeps, children no older than 9, their faces blackened with soot. Clothes so thin you wonder if they were stitched from leftover shadows. These kids climb inside chimneys, scraping soot off with brushes and bare hands. It's deadly work. Falls are common. So is suffocation. But hey, they get a crust of bread and maybe a penny. Luxury. A shop window displays mannequins dressed in the height of fashion. The glass is smeared with fog and fingerprints, but you can still make out the styles. Men's coats with tails like opera curtains, women's gowns in arsenic green and murderous mauve. Yes, those were real colors. The dyes used were sometimes so toxic that seamstresses developed rashes and hallucinations just handling the fabric. Beauty really is pain. Possibly lethal pain. There's a debate over whether poor folks tried to imitate upper-class fashion, or if practicality won out. In reality, most people wore whatever they could get. Hand-me-downs, pieced-together garments, coats patched with flour sacks and curtain fabric. One guy's fancy jacket might have 3 different linings from 3 different decades. It's part necessity, part thrift, and part Victorian Frankenstein couture. You enter a haberdashery to escape the breeze. The air smells of wool and chalk. Bolts of fabric line the walls, and a tailor eyes you like you're a walking refund. "Can't fix ugly," his glance seems to say, "but we can wrap it in velvet." A mannequin in the corner is decked out in mourning clothes, jet black, crepe, veils down to the knees. Queen Victoria popularized full mourning after Prince Albert died, and she stuck with it for 40 years. That's not a typo. Women were expected to mourn husbands for 2 years, with a strict protocol for what could be worn when. Men? A black armband for a few months, then back to business. Seems fair, right? Back on the street, the weather shifts, because of course it does. Clouds roll in like they own the place. Rain begins. You fumble with your umbrella, a flimsy contraption made of whalebone and hope. It promptly flips inside out and tries to escape into traffic. You're soaked within minutes, your coat absorbing water like it's emotionally vulnerable. There's a strange comfort, though, in knowing everyone else is damp, too. One man squelches past in galoshes that make him look like he's preparing for trench warfare. A woman nearby wrings out her bonnet like a sponge. A street sweeper laughs and says, "Good day for frogs, ain't it?" You don't respond. You're too busy trying to locate your left sock, which may have drowned. And yet, you survive the day. Wrinkled, sweaty, slightly flammable, and covered in 17 layers of questionable fashion. As you peel off your sodden garments back in your room, you feel the ghost of that corset still hugging your ribs. You stretch. Your spine makes a sound like old furniture. You'll never complain about sweatpants again. Still, there's something undeniably magical about it all. Strutting down a foggy street in a coat with tails, dodging horse poop, pretending not to notice your hat is 3 sizes too big. You're not just surviving, you're doing it in style. Your hands are numb. It's morning again, barely, and you're already late. You fumble with the buttons on your coat, your breath puffing like a desperate little steam engine. Today, you're looking for work. Or, more accurately, for a way not to starve. Victorian London doesn't care about your resume. It cares about whether you can lift, stitch, sweep, or sell, preferably without dying in the middle of your shift. Let's start with the basics. Jobs are everywhere and nowhere. If you're poor, the work is brutal, the pay insulting, and the hours designed by a sleep-deprived demon. And if you're rich, well, congratulations, you probably don't work at all. Maybe you dabble in managing an estate, which involves a lot of sitting and looking serious in portraits. You trudge toward the docks. They say there's always work by the Thames, though no one says it with enthusiasm. The riverside reeks of fish guts, tar, and hopeless ambition. Dock laborers, called casuals, wait in clumps, like pigeons in flat caps, hoping a foreman picks them out of the crowd. No queue, no fairness, just elbows and luck. You jostle your way forward, trying not to get elbowed in the spleen. Too slow. They pick others. You're left with the rest, blinking in the gray light like discarded extras from a Dickens novel. Maybe factory work? You wander toward the industrial district, smoke curling from 100 chimneys like the city's having a very loud, very angry thought. Factories here make everything. Matches, biscuits, boots, soap, lace. You pass one with a sign that reads, "Fossey Jaw Clinic, apply within." It's not a joke. That's what they call the rotting facial condition caused by working with white phosphorus in matchstick factories. Think your teeth falling out, your jawbone dying, and your breath glowing faintly in the dark. Glowing. Neat. Historians still argue whether the factories knew the danger and hid it, or just didn't care. Either way, match girls, most of them teenagers, kept working, lighting the world at the cost of their own faces. Further along, a textile mill looms, massive, deafening, and somehow always damp. You peer through the window. Rows of women hunched over machines, their movements mechanical, and their expressions long since evicted. You try not to notice the sign above the door. No talking, no sitting, no excuses. Let's say you get hired. Your hours? 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., maybe longer. Your breaks? 5 minutes if you're lucky. Your pay? A few shillings a week, barely enough for bread and coal. If you're injured? Well, there's the door. Try not to bleed on the carpet. You're hungry, again. A bakery is nearby, the smell of fresh bread so divine it practically levitates you across the street. You stare into the window at warm loaves, knowing you can't afford any. Inside, the baker is hiring, but he wants experience and strong hands. You offer your best, I'm both desperate and capable smile. He shrugs. Maybe come back Tuesday? You won't. Time for Plan C. Street work. Not that kind. The other kind. Maybe you sell matches, flowers, or pins from a basket. Maybe you sweep crossings. Maybe you shine shoes, chant rhymes, or sell newspapers you can't read. Maybe you're a mudlark, scavenging along the Thames for anything worth selling. Bits of coal, nails, rope, the occasional dead cat. Yes, they were sometimes sold for fur. You see a group of mudlarks now. Kids barely out of toddlerhood, pants rolled up, squelching through muck that's 40% water, 60% regret. One of them waves a broken spoon at you like he's struck gold. You walk faster. Desperate now, you head toward the grander part of town. Mayfair, Kensington. Streets so clean you feel like apologizing just for stepping on them. Here, there's work as a domestic servant, if you don't mind being invisible. The homes are enormous, the door knockers brass, and the people inside speak in tones that make "please" sound like a threat. You knock at one. A butler answers. He looks like he's been carved out of a particularly judgmental tree. What is it? Looking for placement, sir. General help. I clean, I scrub, I don't die easily. He looks you up and down, unimpressed. Still, he passes you off to the housekeeper who gives you a trial. Your first task, polish the front hall floor, on your hands and knees, with a rag and vinegar. She watches you for 5 minutes, then says, "You're too slow." Back on the street again. Quirky historical tidbit for the day. Some people worked as pure finders. Their job? Collecting dog dung. Pure was the euphemistic term for the stuff, used in leather tanning. They stored it in buckets and sold it by the pound. It paid better than sweeping, but you'd smell like a haunted kennel. Another option, become a costermonger. It's a fun word, less fun job. You wheel around a barrow selling fruit, fish, or vegetables, yelling loud, singing rhymes, and dodging the police if you don't have a license. One wrong turn and your cart's confiscated, your potatoes are street art, and your day is over. Eventually, you stagger into a public house, just to warm up maybe. Inside, the air is thick with smoke, noise, and that special tang of spilled beer and secrets. You don't buy a drink, you just sit. A man next to you offers to invest in your labor if you'll help him with a delivery. It sounds sketchy. It is sketchy. You decline, barely. As night falls, you finally find work. A woman outside a textile shop needs help loading bolts of fabric into a cart. It's heavy, miserable work. She pays you a penny. One single penny. You stare at it like it might transform into food if you wish hard enough. It doesn't. Still, it's something. Enough for a roll, or a half pint of milk, or a candle stub. As you walk back toward your lodging, exhausted and aching, you pass a group of flower sellers singing a street rhyme. Buy a posy for your love, or curse your name by stars above. It's catchy. You hum it the rest of the way home. So, to survive the Victorian job market, keep moving. Don't get sick. Don't get caught. And whatever you do, don't glow in the dark. You sleep like a rock. If the rock were tossed into a burlap sack and kicked down a flight of stairs, the mattress sags, The pillow crunches like stale bread, and your dreams are just reruns of your job hunt, but with more rats. Markets in Victorian London aren't just places to shop. They're a circus, a battlefield, and a family reunion all at once. They're where fortunes rise and fall, where gossip spreads, and where survival isn't just about buying food. It's about seeing and being seen, knowing which vendor shortchanges and which one will slip you an extra apple because your boots have holes. As you walk back, one last voice calls from a distance. Fresh gooseberries, best in the city. Buy 'em before they regret being born. You smile. And for a second, even with your burnt tongue, empty pocket, and fish-scented shoes, London feels almost bearable. Almost. It's barely dawn, but the sky's already sulking, a damp gray sponge stretched over London's rooftops. You shiver as you step outside, coughing softly into your sleeve. Not because you're sick, necessarily. Though honestly, it's getting harder to tell. Everyone here has a cough. And if you don't, people assume you're either suspicious or rich. Welcome to Victorian healthcare. Well, healthcare. You start the day by passing a chemist's shop. The windows are filled with beautiful blue and green glass bottles labeled with Latin words and terrifying promises. Laudanum, spirits of hartshorn, oil of vitriol. One proudly boasts cures hysteria and spinal woes, which is suspiciously vague and probably just means it knocks you out cold. You step inside. The chemist looks like he's been awake for 7 straight years. He gestures at a tray of powders. Need something for the lungs? Something for the nerves? Something for your aunt who won't stop talking? You shake your head and back out quickly. Self-preservation. A short walk brings you to the entrance of a hospital. It's more a large, drafty house than the glittering temples of healing we know today. St. Bartholomew's, or maybe Guy's. It depends which side of the river you're on, and which set of rumors you believe. Inside, the air smells of alcohol, sweat, and fear. Hospitals are technically free, but only if you're dying impressively, and preferably quietly. If your illness is boring, chronic, or just annoying, you're better off home with a poultice and a prayer. In some cases, a prayer would probably be more effective. You watch as a nurse wheels out a tray of surgical tools. No gloves, no antiseptic. Just a bottle of gin, and a hope that the doctor washed his hands after lunch. Historians still argue whether most Victorian surgeries saved more lives than they ruined. Some suggest the survival rate depended less on the procedure and more on the speed. Surgeons competed to amputate limbs in under 2 minutes. One guy allegedly managed 3 in 5 minutes, including one accidental assistant. You back away from the hospital before anyone gets ideas about your limbs. Let's say you don't go to a hospital. Most don't. You stay home. Maybe you use a home remedy, like crushed snails for sore throats, or turpentine rubbed on your chest, or tobacco smoke enema kits. Yes, exactly what it sounds like. You head down an alley where a crowd's gathering around a woman in a bonnet. She's a quack, and proud of it. A self-styled healer offering miracle tinctures and life-restoring vapors. She holds up a vial of brown liquid. Cures gout, headaches, indigestion, heartbreak, and ghosts. Ghosts. You're tempted, but your common sense narrowly wins today's battle. One man next to you says he bought her tonic and his back pain vanished. Another says it made his chickens walk in circles. A third is already asleep on the pavement. You move on. Not far from there is a filthy building with a wooden sign reading apothecary and accoucheur. That's an old word for a male midwife, though you'd never guess it from the peeling paint and the sinister creaking door. Inside, you glimpse shelves of powders, dead bugs in jars, and what may be a raccoon skull. There's a crowd of women waiting, pregnant, pale, and mostly silent. Childbirth in this era is terrifying. Pain relief is limited unless you're royalty. And the idea of germ theory is still a newfangled whisper. Many births happen at home, aided by midwives armed with instinct, towels, and fervent hope. If you're wealthy, you might get ether or chloroform, though some doctors argue that pain is natural and good for the character. We won't name names, but someone definitely got slapped with a fan for that opinion. Quirky tidbit of the day? There were public health ads warning against reading novels during pregnancy because it might overstimulate the unborn child. Yes, you might give birth to a hysterical bookworm. As you weave back toward the street, you nearly collide with a night soil man. He's dragging a sloshing cart through the alley, cleaning out privies and cesspits. The smell hits you with the force of a bad decision. These men were the unsung sanitation heroes of London, but good grief, the olfactory price they paid. Your path brings you to a drinking fountain, newly installed by a public health committee. Clean water, at last. Kind of. You still hesitate before sipping. Cholera's favorite party trick is hiding in plain sight. People thought it came from miasma, bad air. Some still do, but a few brave doctors, hi, Jon Snow, are starting to suggest it might be the water. You sip anyway. You're thirsty and statistically reckless. A passing child hawker coughs violently behind you. You flinch. There's a lot of that going around. Tuberculosis, known as consumption, is everywhere. It thins the face, brightens the eyes, and kills slowly. Some Victorians find it oddly romantic. You don't. It just looks exhausting. You pass a workhouse infirmary next. The building is quiet, eerie. These institutions were meant to care for the destitute sick. In reality, they mostly just hid them from public view. The poor were expected to be grateful for gruel and hard benches. Nurses were often untrained. And the dead? Well, some ended up on dissection tables, especially if no one came to claim the body. As dusk begins to seep in, you spot a rare sight. A new mother walking with a healthy baby. A miracle in this city. She's smiling. The baby sneezes, and the mother instinctively wraps him tighter, like she can will away every invisible threat. You catch her eye, and for a moment there's a strange, shared understanding. You're all just trying to survive this giant, damp, coal-scented gamble called London. You end your day in front of a small bookshop. A sign in the window reads, "Public Lecture, The Science of the Germ." You chuckle. Most people still think germs are a hoax, that cleanliness is for vain people and weak constitutions. But you're starting to believe in the invisible, especially after the cabbage you saw moving on its own this morning. So how do you survive Victorian medicine? Avoid hospitals, if you can. Be suspicious of anything in a bottle that says, "cures everything." Don't eat anything blue. Wash your hands, even if people laugh at you. And whatever you do, keep breathing. Carefully, People Night in Victorian London is not just dark. It's alive. The gas lamps sputter like nervous candles, flickering through the fog that coils in every alley and drifts like a ghost across cobblestones. You step cautiously, aware that London doesn't sleep so much as shift form after dusk. By day, it's grim. By night, it's a dare. Your first stop? The Gin Palace. Lit like a stage play and smelling like last regrets, a gin palace is a beacon to the weary, the poor, the reckless, and occasionally, the aspiring poet. You push open a heavy door, greeted by brass fixtures, mirrors, and the hum of conversation rising above the clink of glass. It's fancier than you expected. Velvet wallpaper, stained glass windows, gaslight chandeliers. You feel underdressed, overwhelmed, and slightly flammable. You're handed a small tumbler, It's filled with mother's ruin, cheap gin strong enough to remove paint. You sip. It tastes like regret and botanicals. 2 sips in, and you understand why so many Victorians treat gin not as a drink, but a religion. Historians still argue whether gin was a symptom or a cause of the era's urban misery. Was it medicine, poison, or mercy in a bottle? For many women especially, gin was both solace and sabotage. It dulled hunger, softened pain, and occasionally made you forget how many of your children didn't survive past age 5. You leave before the room starts spinning. Back on the street, the air has changed. Louder, looser, more alive. You turn down a narrow alley and into a different kind of nightlife. Music halls. These are the beating heart of London's working-class entertainment, where laughter is currency and bawdy songs compete with heckles. Inside, the room smells of beer and sawdust. A performer in a too-tight bodice belts out a tune about chimney sweeps and unfaithful grocers. You laugh. Everyone does. Humor is the best defense in a city built on irony and sewage. A man sidles up beside you, offers a cigarette, then tells you he's a poet when he's not drunk. Which, by the look of things, is rarely. He recites a line about fog being the city's only honest citizen. You tip your imaginary hat and move on. Outside, the real show begins. You make your way to 7 Dials, where 7 streets collide like a tangle of choices. Here, street performers juggle knives, sell ballads printed on cheap paper, and tell fortunes for a halfpenny. You catch sight of a man in rags pretending to be blind, until someone tosses him a coin and he neatly catches it mid-air. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Performance art at its finest. A constable strolls past, tipping his hat to no one in particular. He eyes a group of boys playing dice in a doorway, but does nothing. It's late. There's no overtime for moral enforcement. You head toward the Thames, where the fog grows thicker. Shapes move in it, some human, some not. Dockworkers, smugglers, and the occasional body being discreetly dropped into the water. You avoid looking too long. Quirky tidbit. The fog isn't just weather. It's partly man-made. Coal smoke, factory soot, and the exhalations of millions of chimneys combine into what people call pea supers. One was so thick, you could walk into the river without seeing it coming. And people did. At the edge of the wharf, you spot a group of women laughing and calling to passers-by. Sex work in Victorian London is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, officially condemned, unofficially tolerated. In Whitechapel alone, there are over 1,000 knowns. They live in lodging houses, under arches, in shadows. You don't judge, you also don't stop. Safety in the city, like warmth, is something you must constantly seek. A woman leans out from a doorway and sings softly, "Come inside, love, come inside." You shake your head, offer a smile, and keep walking. She doesn't look offended, just tired. Your next stop is Clerkenwell, where illegal gambling dens light up the basements. Passwords, nods, coded knocks. You follow a man through a hidden side door and down a narrow staircase. Inside, the room buzzes. Men and women hover over card tables and spinning wheels, smoke curling like question marks. No one smiles too widely. Everyone knows the house always wins. You put down a borrowed shilling. You lose it instantly. You leave before you lose more. Upstairs, a fight has broken out over something minor. Cheating, or a spilled drink, or someone looked at someone the wrong way. You edge out, unnoticed, which is the best-case scenario in Clerkenwell after midnight. From there, you follow the music again. Not the cheerful kind this time, but the slow, haunted tune of a violin playing in an abandoned square. An old man plays it with his eyes closed, like he's remembering someone who once danced. A child drops a crust of bread into his hat. It feels like a small miracle. You turn a corner into Covent Garden, which is less dangerous and more surreal at this hour. Flower sellers sleep curled up in their carts. A stray dog joins you for 3 blocks, then disappears into the mist like a character who's fulfilled his plot function. You pause at a lamplighter's ladder. A boy no older than 10 is climbing up to extinguish the flame. Gas lamps don't last the night. Neither do you, really. You're fading, bone-tired, somewhere between hunger and hallucination. You stumble into a night kitchen, one of the few that stays open for cabbies and drunks. You buy a bowl of thick soup with mystery meat and dunk a piece of bread that has the density of a paving stone. You don't ask what's in the soup. You're not emotionally ready for the answer. The boy who served you says he sleeps on the flour sacks in the back room. He's missing 2 teeth, but doesn't seem to mind. It's warm, he shrugs. And nobody hits me here. You nod. In this city, nobody hits me is 5-star accommodation. The night starts thinning. You walk the long road back toward your lodging, boots damp, eyes gritty. A foghorn sounds in the distance. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, a bell tolls. It's not clear if it's morning, warning, or just habit. So, how do you survive Victorian London at night? Stick to the gaslit streets. Know when to laugh, when to run, and when to say no. Keep moving. Don't gamble. Don't drink the gin. And if someone offers to tell your fortune, maybe just let the mystery be. You reach your bed just as dawn begins to melt the dark. London, somehow, has survived another night. So have you. Your boots are still damp from last night, and the chill has crept into your bones. But there's no rest. Not in Victorian London. Not when rent is due and stomachs grumble like protesters at a public hanging. Today, you're on the hunt for something elusive and precious. A job. And just to manage expectations, it's probably going to be awful. You start your day at the labor exchange, if you're lucky enough to have shoes and working limbs. It's a noisy, crammed building that smells like sweat, ink, and desperation. A clerk with ink-stained cuffs reads names off a list while dozens lean in, hoping their skills, if they have any, are relevant today. You do your best to look strong, capable, and not visibly contagious. "Can you read?" the clerk asks, not looking up. You nod. "Well, don't let that get around. You'll be too expensive." You smile tightly, though you're not sure he's joking. He sends you to a nearby warehouse where they're hiring for dock labor, which is Victorian for, you might die under a crate and no one will notice until Thursday. But it's work. Kind of. You arrive to find a foreman shouting over the noise of barrels being rolled and crates being dropped. You're handed a rope, pointed at something too heavy to lift, and told not to be lazy. You throw your weight into it and immediately wish you'd eaten more this week. That's when you spot something glimmering in the muck by your boot. Nope. Just a tooth. Moving on. Victorian work is brutal by design. Efficiency isn't just a buzzword. It's an excuse to exploit. You're not expected to thrive. You're expected to function just long enough not to be a liability. Take children, for example. You pass a chimney sweep no older than 8. He's coughing soot and carrying tools too large for his frame. "Started when I was 4, he says proudly, as if that's a flex and not a Dickensian horror story. His employer, who's paid his parents a pittance, claps him on the back and mutters something about tiny hands being God's gift to narrow flues. Historians still argue whether Victorian child labor was a grim necessity or a moral failure. Probably both. Children worked in textile mills, coal mines, and matchstick factories. Some went blind, some blew up, some just never came home. Speaking of matchsticks, quaint, right? Until you remember the girls who made them. The matchstick girls dipped wooden splints in white phosphorus, which caused phossy jaw. That's when your jawbone slowly decays and glows faintly in the dark. A gruesome way to die, but very on-brand for London's flair for macabre science fiction. You quit the dock after 3 hours. Not because you're weak, because someone dropped a barrel and no one noticed. The man underneath? Still not moving. No one's rushing to help. You decide to try something else. You head toward Clerkenwell again, where there's always work for the bold and the morally flexible. A woman in a crooked hat offers you a spot selling roasted chestnuts from a coal-fired cart. "It's mostly standing," she says, "and yelling, and fire, and soot, and sometimes rats." You nod. Sounds like a promotion. She hands you a scoop, a dirty apron, and 5 chestnuts to sample. You taste one. It's edible. Probably. You shout hot chestnuts, fresh chestnuts, until your voice goes hoarse. People glance. Some buy. One man tries to pay with what appears to be a button and a story about the Crimean War. You hand him a free one out of sympathy or fear. Street vending is unpredictable. If it rains, you're doomed. If a constable doesn't like your face, he can confiscate your cart. No refund, no appeal. Just whoosh, there goes your livelihood. You pass a man sharpening knives on a wheeled grindstone. He nods at you. "Want to try?" he asks. You decline. You've already sharpened your survival instincts today. Down the road, you spot a pure finder. He's carrying a bucket. You ask what he's collecting. He grins. "Dog dung," he says. "For the tanners." You nod slowly. Of course. The tanning industry uses it to soften leather. There's no such thing as useless waste in this economy, just repackaged misery. And yet, there are jobs people fight to keep, like the costermongers, fruit and veg sellers with loud voices and sharper elbows, or the mudlarks, scavengers who pick valuables from the Thames at low tide. They're half treasure hunter, half swamp creature, and 100% unfazed by cholera. Quirky tidbit. Some mudlarks found teeth, buttons, even coins, and once, allegedly, a full brassiere stuffed with jewelry. But they also found bodies, some floating, some not. You sit on a low wall to rest your legs and count your earnings. 11 pence. Not bad, actually. That'll buy you a roll, some broth, and maybe a scrap of meat that once dreamed of being a sausage. Behind you, 2 gentlemen in top hats pass by. One carries a cane with silver trim, the other a pipe he doesn't light. They talk about rail investments and the curious issue of Irish unrest. You don't know what that means, but it sounds above your tax bracket. Still, you wonder what it's like to be rich here, to be gainfully employed as a banker or a writer or a gentleman of leisure, to have hands that don't blister and shoes that don't leak. Maybe in another life. But for now, you move on to find one last opportunity. The factory. You line up with a crowd outside a brick building that looms like a prison. Inside, the air is hot, noisy, and full of spinning machinery that wants to eat your limbs. The floor manager barks orders, doesn't bother learning names. Your job? Feed wool into a machine. Keep your fingers. Don't look up. You last 30 minutes before you fake a stomach cramp and limp out. You're not built for this. Few are. Even fewer leave whole. So how do you survive Victorian jobs? You don't aim for comfort. You aim for not bleeding. Learn fast, speak little, and know when to run. Say yes until you can afford to say no. And above all, if someone offers you a better job with vague details and no paperwork, it's either a scam or you're about to become a magician's assistant. Possibly both. You head home with sore feet and soot in your hair. Still breathing, still employed. Technically. Sleep doesn't come easy in Victorian London, not with the day's grime still on your skin and street sounds leaking through thin walls. You dream of falling down chimneys, of drowning in soup, of chestnuts that scream when you roast them. Then the sun rises. Again. You wake to bells, church bells, market bells, a handbell from a fishwife shouting about eels like they're discounted treasure. Today is your day off, or at least your day less on. You need food, supplies, and maybe, just maybe, a moment of human decency. You head to the market. Spitalfields first, because it's close and chaotic. The smell hits before you see it. Spices, fish, sweat, rotting cabbage, and something vaguely metallic. The stalls bulge with questionable produce. Apples with bruises, turnips the size of fists, and meat that's probably been dead longer than your landlord's last bath. A woman waves you over. 2 onions for a penny, or 5 if you don't ask what happened to the 6th. You smile and hand her a coin. She gives you 4 onions and a suspicious wink. Markets are the city's bloodstream. You don't just shop. You bargain, you banter, you dodge pickpockets, and occasionally step in something historical. You pass a butcher's stall. The meat is hanging, barely covered, definitely buzzing. A pig's head stares at you like it knows how this ends. You consider some sausages, but remember yesterday's soup and the mystery meat that might have been these sausages in disguise. You keep walking. Street food is everywhere. Stewed eels in gelatin, pie and mash with a liquor sauce that's green and optimistic. You settle on a meat pie from a vendor with a clean apron. Big mistake. The crust is fine, but the filling tastes like disappointment and cartilage. Quirky tidbit? Some pies in London were recycled, as in, the meat was gathered from animal carcasses, swept from streets, or scraped off butcher floors. Or worse, acquired through the efforts of the infamous cat meat men, who did exactly what you hope they didn't. You wash it down with water, and then instantly regret it. Water in London is a gamble. The Thames is still the city's main source, and it's also the city's main sewer. If you don't boil it, filter it, or pray hard enough, you're inviting cholera in for tea. Historians still argue whether the authorities truly believed the miasma theory, that bad smells, not germs, spread disease, or if it was just easier to blame the air than fix the plumbing. Either way, many preferred beer or weak tea. At least those were boiled. You grab a jug of small beer, barely alcoholic but safer than the liquid sloshing in public fountains. Now for clothes. You head toward Petticoat Lane, where second-hand garments hang like surrender flags. There's a coat that might have once belonged to someone respectable, or at least someone who didn't die in it. The seller assures you it's free of lice, which is never a good sign. You hold it up to the light. It has holes, but fewer than your current coat, so sold. You also pick up a pair of gloves, not because you're fancy, but because touching door handles in this city is like shaking hands with bacteria itself. From there, you follow the noise towards the Rag and Bone Men. These are London's recyclers, shouting "rags and bones" as they pull carts filled with broken metal, discarded shoes, and mystery items that might have been toys, tools, or instruments of mild torture. One offers you a dented tin cup for a halfpenny. You decline. He then offers a taxidermied ferret. No explanation, just the ferret. You decline harder. You pass by a pawn shop. Tempting. You've got a brooch you found near a sewer grate, probably dropped by someone richer or murdered. The shopkeeper eyes it suspiciously. "Looks French," he mutters, which is to say, cursed. He offers you 3 pence. You haggle him up to 4 and leave slightly richer and mildly hexed. Your next stop is a soap seller, or rather a man with chunks of lye soap stacked like cheese wedges on a cart. "Guaranteed to remove dirt and skin," he boasts. You buy a piece the size of a rat. It smells of lard and lavender and ambition. You need to clean more than your hands, though, so you seek out a public bath. These are sparse, steamy places where the water is hot and your privacy is theoretical. You pay a penny for a tin tub, a lump of soap, and 30 minutes of something that feels like luxury until you notice the drain isn't working. Still, you soak, you scrub, you almost feel human. Until someone knocks. Oi, time's up. You get dressed and dry your hair with your sleeve. You feel a bit better. Cleaner, sharper. You've got food in your stomach, kind of. A new coat-ish, and no visible lice. That's a win. On your way home, you spot something strange. A line of people in their best clothes queuing outside a grand building. Curious, you ask someone what's going on. A charity handout, they whisper. Bread and soup, but you've got to look like you need it. Poor but respectable, you know? You glance at yourself. You might qualify. You queue. You wait. You're handed a hunk of brown bread and a ladle of thick stew. The bread is tough, the stew is suspicious, but you eat every drop, because tomorrow it might not be there. And then, before you turn in, a quick stop at the apothecary. This isn't your cozy pharmacy. It's a cave of mystery bottles, animal parts in jars, and a man with a beard that could hide entire moral quandaries. You ask for something for cough, hunger, and the growing anxiety that your liver might be plotting against you. He offers you a bottle of something syrupy and red. What's in it? You ask. He shrugs. Mostly opium and hope. You take it. So, how do you survive shopping in Victorian London? You haggle. You sniff before you bite. You check your water. You boil your tea. You assume every pie is lying to you. You buy soap. You try not to take anything that looks at you first. And you learn that survival is a form of consumption. Eating, drinking, bartering, bathing, but also knowing when not to. You head home with your belly slightly full, your pockets slightly lighter, and the strange sense that, for today at least, you might just make it. The gas lamps flicker to life as dusk falls, painting London streets with an eerie, smoky glow. You're tired, sore, and your coat smells faintly of the soap that barely cleaned off yesterday's grime. But tonight, survival is about something else. Shelter. Finding a safe place to rest your head is a game of luck and street smarts. Your options are grim at best. You could try the workhouse, an institution that promises a bed and food in exchange for labor. But these places are notorious for their brutal discipline, meager rations, and the kind of company that gives nightmares. People go in hoping to leave, but many never do. Or you could seek out a lodging house. These are often cramped rooms, shared with strangers who cough openly and snore like foghorns. Privacy is a fantasy, and cleanliness is optional. You head toward Whitechapel, where lodging houses are plentiful and desperation thick in the air. The first one you find is a brick building with peeling paint and a flickering lantern over the door. The sign reads, "Beds to let." You step inside, greeted by a mix of tobacco smoke, sweat, and the faint scent of decay. The clerk eyes you suspiciously. "Bed for the night?" he grunts. You nod, produce a penny. He hands you a key and points up a narrow, creaking staircase. Your room is a box barely large enough to swing your arms. A thin mattress lies on a wooden frame. The window is cracked, letting in the sounds of street brawls and distant church bells. You drop your pack and sit on the bed. It creaks ominously. You consider the mattress your throne, your sanctuary, and your cell. As you settle in, you overhear voices through the thin walls. Arguments about rent, stolen shoes, and the price of gin. A baby cries somewhere down the hall. Rats scurry above the ceiling. Sleep is elusive. You remember the advice from a fellow lodger. Don't trust the bedbugs. They bite in rows. You pull your coat tighter, hoping your skin isn't on tonight's menu. If the lodging house is too much, there's always the streets. You know the alleys where the cops rarely go, the courtyards with locked gates that don't stay locked, and the bridges where the fog is thick enough to hide anything. Sleeping rough means risking the cold, the damp, and the occasional mugging or worse. But it also means freedom. Freedom from rules, fees, and the grim look of the lodging house clerk. You remember a story you heard once about a man who survived the winter by nesting in a hollow tree near the Thames. They called him the Hermit of London Bridge. No one really knows if he existed or if it was just a myth to scare children, but it gives you hope. Historians still argue whether homelessness in Victorian London was more a result of economic collapse or personal failure. The truth, like the Thames at high tide, is murky. You decide to leave the lodging house before morning. Better the streets than that tiny coffin. You gather your belongings quietly and slip into the fog. Outside, the city feels alive in a different way. Shadows move. Cats prowl. Lanterns flicker like will-o'-the-wisps leading travelers astray. You find a spot under an archway. The stone is cold but sheltered. You pull your coat over your head and close your eyes. Sleep comes in fits and starts. You dream of warm beds, of clean sheets, of a time when home meant safety. You wake once to footsteps, a man muttering curses about rent, about lost jobs, about a wife who left with the last penny. You don't move. You pretend to be part of the stonework. When dawn breaks, you're alive. And sometimes, in Victorian London, that's enough. The morning fog is still hanging heavy as you step out into the streets, now bustling with merchants, children, and the occasional horse-drawn carriage clattering over cobblestones. Your body aches, your coat is threadbare, and you smell like a cross between damp wool and desperation. But today's challenge is another kind. The unending, noisy, stinking hustle of Victorian London's sanitation. Or rather, the utter lack of it. You know the Thames is the city's lifeblood, but it's also its poison. You trudge past riverfront shacks where men fish, wash clothes, and sometimes, very questionably, bathe. You're tempted to join, but the water is dark and oily, flecked with debris and the occasional floating rat corpse. The river's pollution is a modern horror story in liquid form. London's sewage system is, at best, rudimentary. The majority of waste, human and animal, flows openly through cesspools, gutters, and eventually the river. Night soil men cart away buckets of human waste under cover of darkness, but their work is inconsistent and often ineffective. Walking down a narrow street, you notice a thick sludge filling the gutter. It's a putrid mix of horse manure, rotting food, and who knows what else. You try not to think about what crawls in there. Spoiler alert, it's probably everything. Historians still argue whether Joseph Bazalgette's great sewer system truly saved London or merely delayed its inevitable collapse. What is clear is that before its completion in the late 1860s, the city was essentially one giant open-air toilet. A quirky tidbit? The Great Stink of 1858 was so bad that it forced Parliament to temporarily suspend sessions because lawmakers couldn't stand the smell. Imagine your Congress canceling meetings because of a sewage smell. That's some serious biohazard drama. You find yourself near the famous Fleet River, now mostly hidden beneath the streets, but once a cesspit so foul it inspired many a morbid poem and even a few ghost stories. You wonder if some of those ghosts were just people who never escaped the stench. At a nearby tavern, you overhear patrons grumble about the cholera season again. The disease, which spreads through contaminated water, has killed thousands over the years. You wash your hands vigorously with the lye soap you bought yesterday, knowing full well it won't save you entirely. Navigating the city's sanitation also means contending with horse-drawn traffic. Horses produce tons of manure daily, which piles up on the streets until the dung men cart it away, or until it attracts swarms of flies and rats. Speaking of rats, London's rodent population is legendary. They swarm the alleys, the sewers, even the upper floors of some tenements. Rats are so common that some Londoners keep cats strictly for rodent control. You spot one now, sleek and black, slinking under a cart. You envy its survival skills. Quirky side fact: some Victorian entrepreneurs sold rat poison that was often just deadly enough to kill pets and kids, but not always effective on the rodents themselves. Great business model, terrible outcomes. As you dodge a pile of horse manure, you remember that this filth is also where many of London's poor find their livelihood. Mudlarks scavenging in the riverbanks, ragpickers sorting through garbage for anything valuable. It's a grim symbiosis of poverty and pollution. You pause by a pump, watching as women and children fill buckets with water to take home. They look weary, but determined. Survival is their full-time job. You fill your own bottle, then consider whether to risk drinking from it. Survival here means constant vigilance, even when it comes to something as simple as water. Walking away from the pump, you spot a street cleaner, a man with a broom and bucket, attempting the Sisyphean task of making the streets cleaner. His efforts are valiant, but ultimately futile. You salute him silently. You think about the children playing nearby. They're unaware of the dangers lurking in the water and mud. You hope for their sake the city will change before their innocence is lost to disease or despair. As the day wears on, you realize that surviving Victorian London means surviving the dirt and decay, the smell and the sickness, and the way the city's refuse always seems to find a way back into your life. The afternoon sun breaks through the grimy fog, casting long shadows over London's winding alleys. You feel the pull of something both tantalizing and terrifying. Work. Because in Victorian London, if you want to survive, you need a job, even if it's one that gnaws at your dignity or your health. You decide to try your luck at the docks. The riverfront is a chaotic symphony of shouting sailors, clanking chains, and the sour tang of fish and salt. The docks are both a lifeline and a death trap, a place where fortunes are made, lost, or swallowed whole by the river. You navigate past crates stamped with exotic destinations: India, China, Africa. The British Empire's reach stretches across the globe, but here at the docks, it feels more like a world of grime and grit. Work here is a mix of heavy lifting, waiting, and constant danger. You see men loading barrels, stacking crates, and shouting orders. You spot the stevedores, dock workers who unload ships, often risking fingers and lives to make a quick shilling. You try to blend in, hoping to catch the eye of a foreman. Luck smiles briefly. A man with a thick beard and a booming voice points you toward a pile of sacks. Your task is simple: move sacks from ship to cart. The sacks are heavy and smell faintly of spices and damp. As you lift, you feel muscles protest and your breath shorten. This is hard work, but honest. A quirky detail: some dock workers carried tiny, lucky charms or talismans, like bits of whalebone or dried seaweed, believing they'd protect against drowning or injury. You don't have one, but maybe you should find one. The job is also a social minefield. Dock workers form tight-knit groups, and outsiders, or landlubbers, are often viewed with suspicion. You try to keep your head down, but a few rough hands slap your back with a gruff, "Welcome to London." Historians still argue whether the docks were engines of upward mobility or just grinding poverty for most men. The truth is murky. Some struck it rich, many did not. After a few hours, your back aches and your fingers are raw. But you've earned a few pennies, a small victory in a city that often takes more than it gives. You take a break by the water's edge, watching barges and ships drift lazily. You spot a group of mudlarks, children who scavenge the riverbanks for scrap metal, coal, or lost treasures. Their faces are smudged with soot, and their hands are stained black. You wonder how they survive, risking drowning and disease daily for a few coins. Nearby, a sailor tells tales of far-off ports, strange foods, and dangerous storms. His stories ignite a fleeting sense of adventure inside you, a wish for escape. But the docks remind you that survival here is often about endurance, not escape. It's about showing up, bearing the pain, and hoping to sleep another night. As evening falls, the sounds of the river fade, replaced by distant laughter, curses, and the clatter of tavern doors opening. You leave the docks, your body tired but your spirit slightly steadied by the day's labor. You pass a poster for a music hall show, promising laughter, song, and the strange wonders of the age. You almost consider it, but decide you can't spare the penny tonight. Instead, you head back to your lodging, muscles sore but pockets a bit heavier. Work may be brutal, but it's also your lifeline. And in Victorian London, that means everything. The cold, damp morning air nips at your skin as you step outside once more. The city's relentless rhythm pulling you forward. Today, survival means navigating London's healthcare, or rather, the chaotic, often grim world of Victorian medicine. You've caught a cough that won't quit, a tickle in your throat that's turned stubborn and dry. You know the risks. Coughing in London often precedes something much worse. Tuberculosis, or consumption as it's called, claims thousands every year, and the city's cramped, smoky rooms are perfect breeding grounds. You make your way to a local dispensary, a sort of charity clinic where the poor can get some help, if they can stand the crowds and the smell of camphor. The waiting room is packed with coughing men and pale women clutching children. You catch snippets of conversation. Doctor says it's nothing, but I feel the cold in my bones. I lost my little Mary last week, same cough. The fear is palpable. Doctors in Victorian London are a mix of skilled professionals and snake oil salesmen. Some genuinely want to help, others not so much. Quackery runs rampant. You overhear talk of electrotherapy, a shocking treatment that sounds more like torture. The apothecary behind the counter hands out mixtures that smell of herbs, alcohol, and questionable ingredients. One concoction claims to cure consumption, another to cleanse the blood. You take a small bottle of syrup, wondering if it's hope or poison. Quirky fact: some Victorian remedies included tobacco smoke enemas and bloodletting, believed to balance the body's humors. You shudder just thinking about it. Historians still argue whether these treatments did more harm than good or were the best medicine available given the era's limited knowledge. You remember a story about Florence Nightingale, who revolutionized nursing with her insistence on cleanliness and fresh air in hospitals. She's a beacon of hope in an otherwise grim landscape. Outside, the air smells faintly of carbolic acid, a new disinfectant slowly gaining popularity. It's the future, but progress is slow. You leave the dispensary feeling both reassured and uneasy. The city's fight against disease is ongoing, a constant battle fought with both science and superstition. On your way back, you pass a mortuary, its windows dark and grim. A line of mourners waits outside, their faces etched with loss. You realize that surviving Victorian London means facing death daily. Sometimes in hospitals, sometimes in the streets, often in your own home. And that sometimes the best medicine is just making it through another day. The clatter of horse hooves and shouts of street vendors greet you as you enter the bustling market district. Here, among the stalls overflowing with fresh produce, meats, and strange spices from across the empire, survival depends on your wits and your nose. Food in Victorian London is a precarious luxury. For the poor, it's often stale bread, watery soup, or mystery meat of dubious origin. You wander through the market, the scent's a chaotic mix of fresh fruit, rotting vegetables, and something faintly metallic that makes your stomach turn. You stop at a stall selling meat pies. The crust's golden, but the filling suspiciously gray. You remember reading that some unscrupulous vendors used fillers like sawdust or chalk to bulk up their goods. It's a grim thought, but survival sometimes means taking risks. You pick up a few potatoes and an onion, simple staples that can stretch into a meal. Freshness is a gamble. Food poisoning is common, but hunger is worse. A quirky fact: swill milk was a notorious problem. A deadly milk watered down and contaminated by pigs' leftovers, sold to the poor, and blamed for many childhood deaths. You shudder at the thought of feeding it to your own kin. Historians still argue whether Victorian food adulteration was a result of greed or sheer desperation to feed a growing population cheaply. Whatever the cause, the effects were deadly. You hear a street cry, "Buy your bread fresh this morning." A woman sells hot bread from a basket, steam rising like a comforting fog. You decide to spend your last penny here. As you eat, you watch a group of children dart between stalls, grabbing scraps and dodging hawkers. Their laughter is a brief relief from the harsh realities. Food scarcity isn't just about hunger. It's about social standing. The rich feast on imported delicacies, while the poor scavenge and endure. You overhear gossip about a new charity kitchen opening nearby, promising free meals for the desperate. A glimmer of hope in a city that often feels indifferent. Walking away, you remind yourself that every meal is a victory, every crumb a small triumph over the city's relentless grind. And in Victorian London, where survival is often measured bite by bite, that's saying something. As evening approaches, the city's noises shift from bustling markets to the steady hum of social life. And sometimes, its darker underbelly. Tonight you dive into the world of Victorian London's entertainment, and the dangerous allure it holds for the desperate and curious alike. You find yourself near a bustling music hall, its bright gas lamps and colorful posters promising a night of laughter, song, and escape. The air is thick with the scent of cheap perfume, tobacco smoke, and spilled beer. Inside, a crowd jostles for space, eager to forget their worries in the riotous performances. Music halls are the beating heart of working-class entertainment. Here, you can laugh at slapstick comedy, marvel at acrobats, or sing along to popular tunes. But beware, the line between delight and disaster is thin. You learn that many performers are young women trying to carve a living, often exploited by managers and patrons. The audience includes ruffians, shopkeepers, and sometimes the city's more unsavory characters. Quirky tidbit: penny gaffs were even cheaper, rowdier shows where fights broke out regularly, and the performances were often bawdy and scandalous. Perfect for a quick distraction if you can handle the chaos. Historians still argue whether music halls were merely escapism or subtle forms of social resistance. Some say they offered working-class people a voice. Others claim they reinforced stereotypes. You chat with a bartender who shares stories of gentlemen who prey on women here, and of pickpockets who thrive in the crowd's crush. Your pockets feel suddenly lighter. Time to be cautious. Outside, you pass a group of street performers juggling knives and telling tall tales. Their bravado is impressive, but also a reminder. Life in Victorian London is a constant gamble. You consider a visit to a gin palace, those infamous establishments where the city's poor drown their sorrows and sometimes their futures in cheap, potent gin. The drinks flow freely, but so do the tears and the violence. As you leave the music hall district behind, you hear the distant toll of Big Ben. The city never truly sleeps. It just shifts gears. Tonight, entertainment is both a balm and a risk, a way to survive the harshness and forget, if only for a moment. You trudge back to your lodging, the echoes of laughter and music fading into the foggy night. And in this city of contrasts, you learn that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about finding moments of joy amid the struggle. Dawn breaks again, but today, you decide to explore the world of Victorian London's policing and crime. The city's streets buzz with a different kind of tension, a subtle dance between law and lawlessness. You walk toward Bow Street, home to the famous Bow Street Runners, the early ancestors of the modern police force. These men, part detective, part vigilante, patrol the city trying to keep order amid the chaos. But they're few, underpaid, and often corrupted. You notice the wary eyes of passers-by. Crime here is as common as the fog, from pickpocketing to violent brawls, and even the infamous Jack the Ripper murders, still fresh in the city's memory. You stop at a police station, its walls covered with wanted posters and notices about recent crimes. The officers look tired, but determined. You overhear talk about thief-takers, private citizens who capture criminals for a reward, a profession that sometimes blurs into vigilantism or outright criminality. Quirky tidbit. The Peeler nickname for police officers comes from Sir Robert Peel, who founded the Metropolitan Police in 1829. Londoners had mixed feelings about these early officers. Some welcomed order, others feared losing their freedoms. Historians still argue whether early policing reduced crime or simply displaced it to less visible corners. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. As you wander the shadowy streets, you see the tools of survival for criminals: secret alleys, hidden doors, and a network of underground tunnels known as the London Underworld. It's a parallel city beneath your feet, where thieves, smugglers, and prostitutes eke out their existence. You pass a group of street urchins. Some might call them pickpockets, others survivors. They dart through the crowd, nimble and quick, learning their craft young. You remember that even the police struggled with the city's rapid growth and the sheer number of desperate souls trying to survive. As night falls, you hear the distant clanging of a jail cell door. The cycle of crime and punishment spins endlessly here. And for you, the lesson is clear. Survival in Victorian London means understanding not just the law, but the shadows it casts. As twilight settles over London, the city takes on a quieter, more insidious mood. Tonight you venture into the realm of Victorian London's housing, the cramped, perilous, and often deadly homes of the poor. You find yourself in a maze of narrow streets lined with tenements so tightly packed they block out sunlight. These rookeries, as they're called, are infamous for overcrowding and squalor. Families of 6 or more cram into single rooms, sharing beds, air, and diseases. You step inside a lodging house where the smell hits you first. A mix of stale sweat, damp wood, and something faintly sour. The air is thick and heavy, and your cough flares up again. You squeeze through a narrow doorway into a small room where a family sleeps on a single mattress, children huddled close. A quirky detail: some lodging houses charged by the hour, catering to transient workers or the homeless who needed a place to sleep for a few pennies. The idea of paying for sleep seems bizarre, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Historians still debate the extent to which these housing conditions directly fueled London's epidemics. But it's clear that cramped quarters, poor ventilation, and contaminated water were a lethal combination. You hear the creak of old floorboards and the distant sound of rats scurrying. Pest control is non-existent, and vermin rule these dark spaces. Outside, the streets are filthy, with rubbish piling up by the walls and children playing in puddles contaminated by sewage. You watch as a woman opens her door to hang laundry on a line stretched between buildings. The fabric is threadbare, and you wonder how many times it's been washed. Despite it all, You see moments of community, neighbors sharing food, children playing, and small acts of kindness that keep hope flickering. Survival in these rookeries is a daily test of endurance, where privacy is a luxury and health a constant risk. As you leave, the air feels lighter in the open streets, but the weight of the city's living conditions lingers with you. In Victorian London, home is both refuge and trap, and learning to navigate its dangers is key to staying alive. The fog has thickened to a heavy, choking blanket by the time you find yourself wandering near the infamous East End. Here, survival is a raw, unfiltered struggle, and every street corner seems to whisper tales of poverty, crime, and resilience. You step carefully past slums that crowd the narrow lanes, their windows glowing faintly with candlelight. The air smells of coal smoke and something more unsettling, a mixture of sweat, urine, and stale ale. This area is infamous for its criminal gangs, but also for a gritty sense of community. You notice children playing in the dirt, their faces smudged with grime but bright with mischief. You pass a street vendor selling pea soup, a thick, cheap staple for the hungry masses. The soup is hearty but bland, often made from spoiled peas and water. You can't help but wince at the thought, but also admire the ingenuity. Quirky fact: the East End was the birthplace of penny dreadfuls, cheap serialized stories filled with crime and horror that were wildly popular among working-class readers. They provided a thrilling escape from harsh realities. Historians still debate whether these sensational tales fueled fear and moral panic, or gave a voice to the oppressed and a glimpse into urban life's darker side. You hear raised voices from a nearby pub, likely another heated argument or perhaps a fight about to erupt. Alcohol, poverty, and cramped living quarters make tempers flare easily here. You watch a group of women washing laundry in a communal basin, their hands red and cracked from cold water and harsh soap. Their strength is palpable. Despite the hardships, the East End spirit is unbroken. You see shopkeepers locking up for the night, while street children scatter to hidden corners, ready to scavenge or steal if necessary. You remind yourself that this city is layered, complex, far from the polished facades of the West End. It's a place where survival means bending, adapting, and sometimes breaking, only to rise again. As you step back into the fog, the distant tolling of church bells echoes, a reminder that life, even in the darkest corners, moves inexorably onward. And for you, the lesson is clear. Surviving Victorian London means understanding its contrasts, its brutal truths, and its unyielding human spirit. Night deepens, and you find yourself drawn toward the gas-lit streets of the West End, where the city's glittering facade masks a complex web of wealth, power, and precarious survival. Here, survival looks different, more about appearances, social maneuvering, and keeping up with the relentless pace of Victorian society. You stroll past elegant townhouses with their polished brass knockers and pristine windows. Ladies in fine gowns and men in top hats move briskly, their footsteps echoing on cobblestones slick with recent rain. The contrast with the East End couldn't be starker. Yet beneath the surface, the West End has its own struggles. Servants work tirelessly behind closed doors, their lives often as harsh as those they serve. You glimpse a butler sternly instructing a maid, both shadows in a household where class lines are sharp and unforgiving. A quirky detail: many upper-class Victorians believed in moral hygiene and strict social codes, but scandals involving secret gambling dens, illicit affairs, and even underground opium dens were common, if rarely spoken of. Historians still debate how much of the Victorian morality was genuine conviction versus a mask to conceal hypocrisy and protect social privilege. You pause at a grand theater, its marquee glowing with the promise of high drama and spectacular performances. The theater is a place where the city's elite indulge in art and culture, but also where actors risk scandal and ruin in pursuit of fame. Outside, you see the aristocratic rags, the fashionably poor who try to mimic wealth but are always one misstep from ruin. Their survival depends on charm, wit, and sometimes desperation. You overhear snippets of conversation about politics, empire, and the latest scientific discoveries. Knowledge here is power, but it's tightly guarded within exclusive circles. You realize that in Victorian London, survival isn't just about physical endurance. It's about navigating the invisible networks of influence, reputation, and social capital. As you walk away from the West End's glowing lights, the fog rolls in again, swallowing the city's secrets, and you carry with you a deeper understanding. Survival here is as much about playing the game as it is about weathering the storm. The city's pulse slows as midnight approaches, but your journey through Victorian London isn't over yet. Now, you face the challenge of rest and recovery, finding a safe place to sleep and gathering strength for another day in this relentless metropolis. You seek out a common lodging house, one of the few affordable options for those without family or fortune. The narrow hallway creaks underfoot as you enter, a dim gaslight flickering overhead. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of damp clothes, unwashed bodies, and a hint of something sour you try not to identify. You pay your penny at the counter and receive a thin mattress on a wooden bed frame, lined up shoulder to shoulder with others. Privacy is non-existent. Strangers snore, cough, and shift around you in the close quarters. You lie down, feeling the stiff mattress beneath you and the chill of the night air sneaking through cracked windows. Sleep is uneasy here. You remain alert to every noise, the scrape of boots, a whispered argument, the distant howl of a dog. Quirky fact: some lodging houses operated on an hourly basis, meaning some patrons only paid for a few hours of sleep, often arriving late and leaving early to avoid extra fees. Historians still argue about the role of these lodging houses, whether they provided essential shelter for the desperate or exploited vulnerable people for profit. You think back to all you've experienced today: the bustling markets, the grim tenements, the smoky music halls, the policing and crime, and the fragile moments of joy and kindness. Despite everything, you feel a strange kinship with the city, its noise and silence, its shadows and lights. As you close your eyes, the distant sounds of Big Ben's midnight chimes echo softly, a reminder that life continues, ever persistent. You take a deep breath, letting the steady rhythm of the city lull you into rest. Tomorrow, you'll wake to another day of survival in Victorian London. But for now, you allow yourself a brief, fragile peace. And as you drift off, you realize something vital. Surviving here isn't just about enduring hardship. It's about finding moments of grace amid the struggle. Slowly now, the city's frenetic energy fades into the quiet hush of night. The fog drifts gently, wrapping you in a soft embrace, carrying away the day's worries and trials. You're safe here for a while, surrounded by the distant murmur of horse-drawn carriages and the faint glow of gas lamps. The air, though still cool, feels less oppressive, more forgiving. Take a moment to breathe deeply, feeling the steady pulse of this ancient city beneath you. Know that you've walked its crowded streets, faced its dangers, and glimpsed its secrets. And though the night is dark and full of challenges, the dawn always comes, bringing new light, new hope. Let your thoughts settle like dust after a long day. Rest is not surrender. It's the quiet strength you'll need to face whatever comes next. So now, dim your lights a little more. Maybe wrap yourself in a cozy blanket and let your mind drift gently, softly toward dreams filled with whispered stories and gentle histories. Sleep well, and when morning calls, you'll be ready once more to walk the streets of Victorian London.